I'm going to call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the June 6th meeting of the West Sacramento Planning Commission. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If, Commissioner Austin, would you like to lead us, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter along with requests to speak cards. As a reminder, everyone that requests a speak card should be completed and returned and turned to the clerk prior to the completion of any staff presentation. For those speakers wishing to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please write the item number on your card. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised, so all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to please be professional and respectful at all times. With that, we will go to the General Administration Functions, Part 1. Presentation by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the Commission. I see none. We'll move on to item B. Correspondence and staff communications from the Planning Commission Secretary, Mr. Tilley.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just want to point out one thing. You should have a memo in front of you from Mr. Laffey regarding agenda item number 2, and we will address that when we get to that item, but I want to make sure each commissioner has one, and again, we'll address that item when we get there.
Thank you. Item C, disclosure of ex parte communications. This is an opportunity for planning commissioners to disclose any communications they've had on the agenda items at this time. We start on my left. Commissioner Sternfeld.
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Berliner.
I had a conversation with a resident about item number 2.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Sablon.
Nothing.
And on my right, Commissioner Austin.
Similar, I had a conversation on item number 2. There was a resident in the area who was noticed and had informational questions, which I responded to the best of my ability and did refer them to the staff report. This was not a resident from any of the impacted parcels.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonard.
Nothing to report.
Vice Chair Liebig.
No communications, however, I did drive by the property. I had just something I couldn't figure out via Google Earth that I wanted to look at.
Thanks. I have no ex parte communications myself. With that, we'll go to the consent agenda, consideration and approval of the minutes from May 16th Commission meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Austin, second.
I'll second.
Second by Vice Chair Liebig. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Thank you. Regular item on the agenda is item 2, a public hearing regarding appeals of zoning administrators' interpretation on recreational vehicle parking setbacks for 4 lots on Violet Drive. Before Mr. Laffey presents, this is a hearing. There's a hearing procedure for appeals, which I'm going to just read through for the commission to be aware of and the members of the public, and we'll go from there. So the Municipal Code Section 1.08.060 establish appeal hearing procedures and require development of a policy for same. That policy requires that presiding officers of the city body or hearing officers or officer hearing the appeal to read a summary of the procedures into the record. The following is that summary will be read for hearings before commissions and the hearing officer. So the way this will work is, number 1, we will open up the hearing. Number 2, we will ask members of the commission or board to publicly announce any testimony or evidence received outside of the hearing process and ex parte communications. So we'll go ahead and do that again for this particular item for the record. And number 3, we will ask members of the commission and to announce any conflicts of financial interest with a material effect, and members shall disqualify themselves if there is such conflict of interest. We'll specify the time the appellant has for his or her presentation and rebuttal. The staff will give a presentation and staff report, place relevant documents in the record, and respond to the questions from the body hearing the appeal. Staff may present any testimony and relevant evidence not previously presented in written report. Evidence is relevant as it proves or disproves a material fact in dispute. Number 6, appellant will present testimony and relevant evidence. Evidence is relevant if it proves or disproves a material fact in dispute. Members of the public will be given the opportunity to present testimony. The public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. The appellant will then have an opportunity to respond to testimony or evidence, but may not introduce new testimony or evidence or restate direct testimony. That will be an opportunity for the appellant to give a rebuttal at the conclusion of all public comment. And then staff may provide responses to testimonies received from the appellant and may be asked to answer questions from the commissioners or board. The presiding officer, in this case myself, will close the hearing, close or continue the hearing. The commission or board will deliberate on the matter and adopt findings if appropriate. The final decision may be deferred for preparation or draft findings consistent with the preliminary decision. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and do open the hearing. That's step 1. All right. And then we'll ask members, all members of the commission to publicly announce any testimony or evidence received outside of the hearing process, any ex parte communications, really quick on this item. I think we've heard a few. If you want to.
Nothing, do you want us to reiterate, or is it covered in the earlier portion of the meeting?
Defer to our attorney.
I don't think you need to reiterate, but one of the disclosures might be able to be expanded on a little bit of who was spoken with, because I think.
Sure. So I'm happy. So I think the first part is, which I think we all need to respond to. I have no known conflicts of interest, material or otherwise, that I'm aware of. And then to reiterate, as far as ex parte communications, a resident who was within the noticing radius had questions about this. This was not someone who lived in any of the parcels that are of question. They were just trying to seek to understand better, and I directed them to refer to the publicly available staff report.
Thank you. And we'll go with Vice Chair Liebig.
Okay. To clarify, I did drive by the house, and my interest had to do with the widths of the driveway and the locations, and whether or not it was a primary or secondary driveway. I will say that, in fact, that this is somewhat unrelated to the judgment we're making today, but I had a personal interest in seeing that. I have no conflicts of interest associated with this project.
Thank you. And on my left, Commissioner Stunfeld has none conflict of interest? Okay. Commissioner Berliner.
I spoke with someone who lives in a different part of West Sacramento about this, but I don't think there's any conflict of interest there.
Commissioner Sablon.
No known conflicts.
Thank you. And there are no known conflicts for myself. And just really quick, the appellant will have 10 minutes to make a presentation with a 5-minute rebuttal towards the end of public comment. At this time, if staff can begin its presentation, staff report.
Yes, good evening, Chair Castillo and members of the Planning Commission. The item before you tonight recommends the Planning Commission affirm the zoning administrator's interpretation regarding the applicable setback for recreational vehicles on 4 lots along Violet Drive. The decision was appealed on May 9th. So as the Planning Commission will recall from the zoning update process last fall, there are 2 separate standards in the city for RV and boat parking in the front yard, depending on the age of the lot and when the lot was created. Lots created prior to August 23rd, 1984 are only required to have the recreational vehicle set back 5 feet from the front yard property line, and lots created after that date are required to conform to the current front yard setback, which in this case is 15 feet. So these lots along Violet Drive are all in the single-family residential zone, R1B. They have a 15-foot front yard setback. So as you can see from this aerial, the 4 lots are similar size configuration as the rest of the neighborhood. But they were a part of a map that was recorded in 1990. The rest of the subdivision was subdivided in a map that was recorded in 1980. So the subdivision map for most of the neighborhood was prior to that 1984 date, and these 4 lots are after that 1984 date. So you go to the next slide. So this is a zoomed in of the subdivision map that was recorded in 1980. As you can see, it does depict the 4 lots in question along Violet Drive. Even though they're not a part of this subdivision map, they are shown on this, on the map. And then if you go to the next slide, the improvement plan utility, the improvement plans for that subdivision that were submitted in 1988 or 89, they show the utility connections for both sewer and water to these 4 lots. So these lots had the utility connections before they were recorded. Further showing that they were contemplated with the rest of the neighborhood. So if you go to the next slide, this is the other utility sheet. And it's shown in the red circle there, the utility stub out to go to the lots. So staff received additional information in the last few days, which have been provided to the commission in the memo. So it's up to the commission on whether or not to include this in the public record. Staff does not object to it being in the public record, but because this is an appeal, any information that comes within 10 days, it is up to the planning commission on whether to take it into the public record. So really the question tonight is whether or not to, whether the front yard setback for RVs and boats for those 4 lots should be the same as the rest of the neighborhood, which is 5 feet, or whether it should be 15 feet, which is the current front yard setback for lots created after 1984. This concludes staff presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And before we go to questions, just really quick, is any of the commission members opposed to including the memo that we received tonight into the public record? See none?
I'm not opposed, that I wasn't able to read it when I arrived, so its contents, if they are material to what we're considering, or there's new information in this, I know it also has to do with other people's participation in this. I can't weigh that decision while sitting here right now and talking about it at the same time. So I'm fine for it being in the record, but I don't know what I can do about it right now.
Okay, I appreciate it. And just want to remind the commission too that what's before us tonight is an appeal of the zoning administrator's determination of the applicable RV setbacks. And there may be other items that we may, or concerns that we may hear as part of this hearing, but to remind the commission that what's before us today is the RV setbacks. So with that, we'll move. Yes.
I'm sorry. It may be helpful since we got this kind of late if staff could actually walk us through what was included in it real quickly.
Absolutely. Mr. Laffey.
So there should be 4 attachments to the memo. The first 2 are comment letters from residents. They are both letters rescinding their original support for the interpretation.
Sorry, can you be clear? They're rescinding their support from the zoning administrator's original interpretation, or rescinding support for the appeal?
The zoning administrator's interpretation. And the attachment number 3 is an email from the appellant to Mr. Tilley, providing additional information. And attachment number 4 is from David McGinnis. He is the one of the 4 property owner of one of the 4 properties. Both of those last 2 attachments address CC&Rs and other issues that are not they're not pertinent to this the zoning administrator's decision.
Thank you. With that, we will go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just wanted to add a little bit of information to supplement the staff report.
Sure.
There's some, in the materials you have before you tonight, there's some discussion about the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that may or may not be on the property, also known as CC&Rs. CC&Rs are privately enforced restrictions on property, and so they wouldn't be something that the city would have a role in enforcing and aren't really relevant or germane to the appeal that's before you tonight. So I just wanted to point that out in case a question arises about it.
Thank you. With that, we will go ahead and let the appellant give her.
I'm sorry, before we move on, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I wasn't finished asking staff.
Okay,
I
go ahead.
would-
Absolutely.
Can I, should we go back to that
No,
later
go
or
ahead.
talk now? On attachment 4, can you please go to that? And in the lower left-hand corner, I can't tell with this photocopy, this is, attachment 4 is subdivision number 2782, but in the lower left-hand corner, there's a small arrow and a title or something saying, I think it says tentative subdivision number 2980. And it appears to be pointing to the 4 lots in that far corner. Wondering what this means, what's going on with 2980, and if this is addressed anywhere. Which seems, it does seem a little strange that it's pointing, it says 2980, but then attachment 3 appears to be a different parcel map, 3883 from what you're
Is this
saying.
attachment 4 of the agenda report, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's possible that the reference to that other map number 2980, that may have been what it was at the time, and that application may have been submitted and then withdrawn, and then they submitted a later map, and that's why it had a new number. The parcel map numbers are assigned, sequentially, throughout the county.
So do we know if 2980 is a recorded map?
I don't know, I don't have that here. That's something we could verify, but I don't have that capacity here in the chambers.
Okay. And then the way subdivision maps were working back then, we had tentative maps and final maps, but they were titled something differently. This, what we're looking at, attachment 4, is a tentative map?
No, this would be a copy of a recorded map.
Did it create the legal parcels that are identified in it, or was it just a tentative map at the time?
No, what you have here as attachment 4 is a recorded final map, also known as a track map in that era. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see that reference. This is page C of that recorded map. This is from our records, which we have copies of all recorded maps in the county.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Leonard?
No.
Okay. Sorry about that. If you can please introduce yourself and,
Is my microphone on?
yes.
Yes. My name is Elisa Greenfield. To the commission, city staff, and the audience, I would like to open by saying my property and the property of David McGinnis and the other 2 lots subject to this appeal were all recorded on January 31st, 1991. You can say what you want about the history of these lots, but the legal fact remains all 4 lots were subdivided and recorded on January 31st, 1991. These properties meet to the letter of the law a 10 to 15-foot setback and side setbacks for RV parking. The city was incorporated on January 1st, 1987. As is true of most laws, setback laws are about public safety, not whether or not you can own a trailer. A pre-city incorporation setback standard of 5 feet exists to grandfather existing homes because people were living in homes covered under the county 5-foot setback standard. However, the city's founding fathers wanted and established a more progressive and safe 10 to 15-foot RV setback for all future development. Setback laws do not preclude a property owner from owning a trailer. Facilities exist in the city where trailers can be safely parked, stored, and accessed. You cannot see through trailers. And because of this fact, they often impose safety hazards on other neighbors. One neighbor should not impact another neighbor's property for any reason or create a hazard where greater care must be exercised by another neighbor. We simply live too close together in neighborhoods. Builder homes in our neighborhood are held to a much higher RV setback standard by builder covenants, conditions, and restrictions, also called CC&Rs. For parking of recreational vehicles, these CC&Rs state, said vehicles shall be screened from view of the street. This is a much higher setback standard than 5 or even 10 to 15 feet. For all builder homes that surround my property, these CC&Rs are legally binding on homeowners. These CC&Rs attach to and run with the land are effective for a term of 35 years, renew every 10 years thereafter, and CC&R violations are enforced through remedy at law or in equity against the person or persons violating any such provision. The CC&Rs do not state a word about enforcement by a homeowners association. The city's enforcement action should not undermine these CCRs. If the city's code cannot match the CCR requirements, they should at least enforce at the maximum setback allowed under municipal codes. Our neighborhood's homes on builder lots were recorded in 1980. But the infrastructure and homes were not built or sold until the 1990s, post-city incorporation. Homes on the 4 custom lots were also built in the early 1990s. No people ever lived in homes on any of these lots under the old county 5-foot setback standards. This fact is true of all homes in my neighborhood. There should not be a grandfather right to a 5-foot setback where no homes existed on August 23, 1984. As a result, the 5-foot setback that is being applied to our homes is not equal to those of all of our homes built once West Sacramento became a city. All other homes enjoy a safer, more progressive 10 to 15-foot setback. I am sure this was an oversight and not the intended outcome of the law or the city founding fathers. Neither should this be the city's recommendation in 2019. Our neighborhood is an anomaly as homes were built 10-plus years after most lots were recorded. Because our homes were built in the 1990s, to be in equal standing with other homes in the city that were built at the same time, our neighborhood should be grandfathered into the city's standard of a 10 to 15-foot RV setback. Citizens of equal standing should be treated equally. Such a grandfather clause might read for lots recorded before August 23, 1984, on which homes were built subsequent to August 23, 1984, front and side setbacks of 10 to 15 feet are applicable. Lastly, setting the pre-1984 setback standard for our homes at this time is archaic. 1984 is 35 years ago. In this case, planning and code enforcement both should consider the unique nature and circumstances of the lots and homes in this neighborhood and be forward and not backward thinking in its recommendations. I strongly recommend the city reconsider its recommendation to reject my appeal. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We're going to hold questions if you don't mind, and then we will go to
Okay.
public.
Would this be the appropriate time then to respond to statements in Mr. McGinnis's material that he submitted to the city?
We're going to respond towards it. You're going to have an opportunity to respond towards the end to all comments that come before us, and the only request to speak
end,
card that I have
okay.
is Mr. McGinnis, so you will have a chance to respond.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much.
No problem. All right, with that, we'll have public comment, and the public comment card that I have is Mr. David McGinnis. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Need my glasses. Okay, thank you for giving me some time. I don't know if you got a chance to read the supplemental declaration I sent in. I think some of you haven't, so I'll just give you the main things. I've no longer any reason to step on her driveway. That's been sorted. I don't have a secondary driveway, as she claims. It's a main driveway. She has a secondary driveway, which is right up to my property line. There are no CC&Rs for my property. I checked that before I purchased it, and I again checked it this week. There are no CC&Rs governing my property. I've also never heard of any incidents with homeowners that only have a 5-foot setback. I've never heard of any accidents or anything like that. I know the zoning was changed in 94 or 84, but that was because the size of the lots, they were putting more properties on the lots. And there were shorter driveways. I mean, you look at some of the ones around Delta Gardens, they've got like 8-foot driveways. I walk around the area regularly. Not any neighbour I spoke to, nobody has any objections to us having been grandfathered into the pre-1984. So even though these 4 homes were built, were not built until after 1984, the code references the lots, not the structures, which I'm sure you're aware. So at the end of the day, it's a question of, do 4 of the 87 homes in our loop deserve to be penalised just because the houses were built post-1984? I believe that the zoning administrator's recommendation is a fair one, and it's shared by nearly 100% of the neighbourhood. Do you have any questions that you want to ask me?
I think we're good at the moment. We'll give if there are no additional public comments, we'll give Ms. Greenfield an opportunity to respond to the public comment. Ms. Greenfield?
Thank you. There have been 2 submissions by Mr. McGinnis. And so my first set of comments are about his original submission. He omitted in the original code citation that he used to substantiate his confusion about the setback standards, an item that I feel is very important, and it's item J2 of the code. He references item J1. And what he omitted was located in any side or rear yard as to prevent a 3-foot wide continuous fire access way from the front of the property. David's trailer is parked in the space intended for fire access. On the other side of the property is a block wall. I don't know how he can meet this requirement. I guess with the trailer parked there, he would also have to fight fires from my property. He should just not be allowed to park a trailer where he has to use my property to service it. And I'll elaborate on that when I get to speak to the comments he just made. He also claimed that he moved his gate and inverter. There's no visible evidence that David's gate or inverter were moved. The city should verify this information and whether a permit was pulled to move the inverter. David did remove a carrier from the rear of the trailer that previously added about 27 inches in length to the trailer. David failed to mention the removal of the carrier in his statement, as it shows the trailer was longer than he stated. When first parked and until notified by code enforcement, the ball of the trailer hitch was protruding into the sidewalk. Someone painted it yellow. The removed carrier is currently standing against the fence between our homes. It exceeds the height of the fence. He did remove a portion of the rain gutter from his house so the trailer could be backed to the gate. If David's driveway is 29 feet and his trailer is only 22 feet, why were modifications of the trailer gates or inverter necessary to meet a 5-foot setback? An official measurement of these statements and the current setback should be made to substantiate his claims. David's property was not, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. David's property was not recorded in 1980 as he claims. His repeated claims of a recording date of 1980 only serve to confuse the issue. His property, along with 3 others, including mine, were in fact subdivided and recorded on January 31st, 1991, and all 4 lots meet the letter of the law in every way for a 10 to 15-foot setback. As to the information that he just presented, he says he no longer put blocks on her side to block his trailer. He says he's not washed the trailer. I saw him washing it one day. And he says he now takes his charging cord out before I back the trailer in, so I have no reason to walk on my driveway. Well, the reason he has to walk on my driveway, well, I want to go back just a minute. I also posted a no trespassing sign because permission was never asked for anyone to use my driveway in any purpose related to this trailer. The trailer has been washed, it gets its electricity plugged in and out. He was blocking his tires from my property. Whenever the trailer is parked in, I have people all over the property. I had asked Mr. McGinnis not to do this, and I understand over Memorial Day weekend, he once again was using my property to back his trailer in. He says she mentions regulations regarding secondary driveways. I had only asked this question of the city, and I never received a response. They're in their secondary driveway brochure of the city. It says that driveways will be 2 feet from a property line. I realize that in our community, there are driveways that are on the property line. This cement was laid in the early 90s. I don't know when these new provisions have come about. I know Mr. McGinnis laid his cement in 2018. So I was asking, that was my point. Not about whether people should have secondary driveways. He states that only 14 homes out of 87 have trailer access to their side of backyard property. And, I don't know what the point of that is. That only means that in our community, where trailers had to be stored out of view, there were that many properties that chose to have trailers and boats. And so they built pull-back driveways, so the trailers and boats could be out of view.
I'll go ahead and let you wrap your last point, Ms. Greenfield, since you had just 5 minutes in the previous presentation,
Okay.
so if you want to just wrap it up.
Sure.
Thanks.
That doesn't give me enough time to respond to all of his comments, but he says I claimed that his property has CC on ours. I have never claimed that. The surrounding builder properties are the properties that have CC in ours. And the 5-foot, I don't know what he's talking about there, is dangerous. 5-foot setback applies to properties with trailers. And he says my claims are not about safety at all. And he mentions another report about when I called to have a motorhome that was parked on the street, across the street from my house, removed. And he's again omitting facts. He wants to say that it's just because I didn't like looking at it. The fact is that children play on that corner. It made a blind corner. It is illegal to park a motorhome or a boat on the street. I found out in talking to one of the neighbors of one of the lots in question that he wasn't aware that I had called, and we discussed this. His son was almost hit by a car. And I have been, harassed, and this continues to come up.
We're going to have to
And-
wrap that up, Ms. Greenfield. You will have an opportunity, if we have questions, to be able to answer some of the questions. But at this time, if staff wants to go ahead and please respond to some of the public testimony, if you have any response, and then we'll have commissioners, give commissioners an opportunity to ask questions to the appellant and the staff.
So the item before you tonight is regarding the age of the lot when it was created and the applicable setback for RVs and boats. There's a lot of information about CC&Rs and other information that doesn't apply to the item tonight. There was one question regarding secondary driveways. There is a requirement that no more than 50% of your front yard be impervious surface. And the Development Engineering Division does have requirements for secondary driveways. But again, that's not what the issue is at hand tonight.
Anything else to add from staff at this time? All right, I'll bring it back to the commission, and I'll start on my left, Commissioner Sternfeld, for any questions or comments?
Which one?
Questions or whatever you'd like, Commissioner.
Are we closing the public hearing?
The
or-
public hearing remains open until we are concluded and ready to deliberate.
Okay, I don't have any questions at this time, but I'd like to hold my opportunity for comments till after the public hearing is
Sounds good.
closed. Thank you.
Commissioner Berliner?
So this is a question, I can ask questions?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this is a question for city staff. So Mr. McGinnis said that the standard applies to lots, not homes built. Is that the case?
Yes, that's the case. So it's lots that were created before or after August 23rd, 1984.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Sablon?
Yeah, so I have a question about the distribution of the pre-1984 lots. I think in the staff report, it says they're kind of spread out throughout the city. So do we have other areas like this where a majority of the lots are under pre-1984 or vice versa?
Yes, there, about 40% or so are post-84. That's anticipated to go up a lot with build-out of Southport. But yeah, there are new developments scattered throughout the city, intermixed with older developments where you have lots that were created before or after.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Well, we can always come back to if you have additional questions. On my right, Commissioner Austin?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonard?
Yes, staff, can one of you guys pull up your slide one more time? One of the last slides in your presentation? Oh, sorry, Katie. Yes, this one. So, also, again, in the lower left-hand corner, I see the NAPOTs, the not a part of this subdivision. Does that mean anything? And also, in the lower right-hand corner, this map says subdivision boundary, which appears to end, well, it appears to explicitly exclude those four. So what is your interpretation of those lots existing as legal parcels at the time this map recorded?
Yeah, so this lot shows the improvement plans from the larger subdivision, which is, you can't quite see the whole picture on this because it's zoomed in.
Yeah.
But it does, what it shows is that these four lots were contemplated with the overall subdivision, and it did have the utilities provided to them. And the right-of-way.
The metric I'm looking for is whether or not these are legally existing parcels at the time this map records. So these are not, what am I trying to say? The metric is whether or not these are legally existing parcels at the time this map records. And so I'm just wondering if your interpretation is that these four lots, no, these four areas are individual subdivided parcels at the time the map recorded. It's an interpretation thing that I'm just trying to get some clarity on.
Yeah, so those four lots were recorded in 1990 with that tentative parcel map, the four-lot tentative parcel map. But they were depicted, and you can...
I know, yeah, I know they were depicted. It's the question is about whether or not they, at the time this map recorded, this earlier one, were these four lots, did they have their own APN numbers? Did they exist as separate legal parcels? And I think the answer to that is no.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Liebig?
No questions.
Thanks. I have no questions at this time as well, as they were asked by my fellow commissioners. So at this time, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for deliberation and comment. And I'll go ahead and start on my right, Commissioner Austin. Comments?
I'm curious to hear what my fellow commissioners have to say about the evidence that's been presented, but I do want to, something I think about a lot when we have situations like this is I think not just whether it's preferable or convenient or by particular residents, but also what does this mean for the broader group of residents? And I can't help but think about this fall, when we had our zoning ordinance modernization update, one of the things one of the proposed changes that we didn't move forward with was around 15-foot setbacks, increasing to 15-foot setbacks around the city. And there was really vehement opposition to that, very, very strong, widespread opposition to that. And I just think that it's really helpful for us to think about that as we're considering this, is not just the two folks who spoke during the public hearing today, but also what folks in our community, what their perspective would be on this. I just think that's a valuable perspective, but that's all for my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonard?
My comments are really on the legal standpoint. I am not an attorney, so I'm not going to pretend to be one, but I deal with this a lot in my professional life, and in my mind, just independent of all of the other stuff that comes from both sides, is that these weren't legally existing parcels at the time, and so they weren't subject to the same rules at the time this map recorded. I know there's a fairness component that you could layer on top of that and speak to after these 4 lots did get subdivided and trying to make things align on the entire street for everybody to be the same. But when I have to deal with this in my professional life, I'm subject to standards that exist at the time these parcels are created. And so my only real comments are I'm just looking at this strictly from that standpoint as opposed to any fairness quotient for the rest of the neighborhood. It is unfair, but these were not legally divided parcels at the time, and so it just, to me, since they did not even exist as their own identity with their own APN, that they would be subject to a different set of standards than what the other map was subject to when it was recorded. So those are my only comments.
Thanks. And perhaps maybe our city attorney can help clarify that a bit. I know there's questions about whether Commissioner Leonard brings up a good point. I think it's good for us to hear from our attorney and see what comment she has.
Sure. Yes, I can chime in. I think it's important to look to the language in the actual municipal code, which refers to, I'm looking at the new section, which was unchanged from the old one, 1722.110 C1, recreational vehicles parked on residential lots which were of record on or before August 23rd, 1984, must comply with these provisions regarding parking. And so there is no definition of what of record means. We have a common understanding of what that means. In certain circumstances, it's not defined in the municipal code. I think it is an ambiguity in the code, which did provide an opportunity for the zoning administrator to weigh in and balance the facts to make a determination. Another interpretation of finding that of record means recorded by is also a reasonable interpretation. So I think that they are both plausible interpretations of this ambiguity in the code. And so that the commission will need to weigh that and make a determination of what they think is the most plausible reading of that code section.
Thank you for that explanation. Vice Chair, any other comments, Commissioner Leonard, for now?
None.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Liebig.
Thank you. And thank you, staff, for pulling together such a thorough packet. Reading through this, I really did get a sense of, I think, what the neighbors are going through. And I did feel, I think, frustration of dealing with process, and I appreciate everybody's patience, as this can be a long and arduous process. I want to come out right off the bat and say the side yard setbacks, the driveway encroachment up to the property line, the CCRs, none of that is included in our appeal hearing tonight. It's all information, but that is not what we're voting on tonight. Tonight, we are voting on the setback from the sidewalk alone. I want to also echo Miss Austin's comments we stumbled across this last fall, and dealing with an inconsistency in our zoning that is based on a date is largely unfair, and we need to address that. And we have that coming back to us at a future date. It's yet to be scheduled, but we postponed that because we wanted more public input on the process overall. So I don't necessarily want to nitpick the current zoning and, or pick that apart and, how to say, fine tune it now when we're about to go into a redo of that zone altogether. And we will need additional public input on that because, as Ms. Austin said, it was contentious. There are people who are there are citizens who are very passionate about their ability to park their RV in their front yards. And there are people who are very passionate about RVs should not be parked in your front yards. So I feel the passion in both of your letters. I just want to say that. But I do think that we need to keep our eye on the big picture for the city versus interpreting on a case-by-case basis here. So I think that is all of my comments. And I do understand the ambiguity between the maps and appreciate the struggles with the dates, as the tentative map appears to have been made prior to 1984, and the final map was made subsequent to. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Sternfeld?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So to Vice Chair Liebig's point, and maybe I can do a quick question of city staff. Are we revisiting that topic? Is that slated for something we're doing this year, or is that not slated something we're doing this year?
We will be bringing back an item later this summer or fall, cleaning up some of the zoning ordinance. There's bound to be a few things we missed. And during that process, we could look at RV and boat parking in the front yard.
So I know the commission, when we discussed this topic and confronted the challenge that we faced during the zoning ordinance modernization, we specifically kind of requested a collaborative process. If this was something that city staff wanted to bring back, that we did it kind of in a workshop and kind of really worked through this as a group. I'm speaking on behalf of my colleagues right now, but I feel like there was pretty good consensus that if that was going to come back up, that was going to be our plan. So I'm hearing a more general technical cleanup than a plan to address RV parking in particular.
Yeah, I think what Seamus is getting at is, as we've now been implementing our new zoning code for really still only a few months since it's been effective, we are jotting down a few things here and there that we're identifying that are somewhat could be problematic as we're now applying it in the real world. If we were to go wade back into the RV and boat parking thing, that would have to be a much more involved, effort. Especially given we know how passionate so many people in our community are about that, as evidenced by the packed room we had during some of our zoning work last year. So I don't anticipate bringing something forward for any consideration about RV parking specifically in the foreseeable future, because we'd really need to devise a game plan about how we'd be able to do that effectively and get good community input on that. From, as you mentioned, as I think it was Commissioner Liebig mentioned, how there are many people that are very passionate on sort of both sides of this topic. Mm-hmm. And so we want to make sure that all parties concerned have an opportunity to weigh in on that if we were to propose any changes to RV parking.
Thank you for that clarity. I think that maybe helps in the discussion that we'll continue to have up here. I am of like mind of Commissioner Leonard in terms of struggling around this issue of contemplated versus completed. And I appreciate fully that not every item in our zoning ordinance is clearly defined with a definition on record. And I also greatly appreciate the benefit of flexibility that the zoning administrator has to make decisions. And it's actually quite difficult for me to think about going against the zoning administrator, knowing the breadth and depth of experience that that person has in making these decisions. At the same token, I am struggling with the points that Commissioner Leonard made about this concept of contemplated versus completed, and when is a parcel a parcel? Because that is really the ultimate legal question in my mind that I think as this thing meanders its way through to whatever outcome it finds is going to be the core issue. And for me tonight, I don't think there's enough to convince me that that what was contemplated at the time was enough to be completed, or to be considered complete in terms of of how we would consider it in any other situation. Take away the rest of the neighborhood and say this is a 5-acre parcel we're subdividing, way down on Jefferson on the way to Clarksburg. I don't think we would apply this the same way, and I want to look at it in that sense, regardless of what's around it. What would we do in any other case? And to me, in any other case, I'm not sure I would view this as a completed, separate 4 parcels. So that's where I'm at the moment. I also, maybe somewhat not germane to the topic, but we've got to figure out this arbitrary 1984 date thing. I know it's an issue, and I know that it's one that's probably near impossible to make everyone happy on, but we've got to do something so that we don't find ourselves in this situation. And one more point I'll make, and this is completely non-germane, but we've got to find something to bring our community together around this too, because candidly, despite all the facts, evidence, purported facts, I was really sad reading this report. I was sad at the level of displeasure that our neighbors are expressing towards one another, the way they're treating each other, the way they're talking to each other. And I want to be clear, it's on both sides. This is not one or the other. And in other cities, this may be okay, but not in our small town. It never sat well with me when we read the staff report, and certainly even tonight. And so regardless of what we ended up deciding tonight, I think there needs to be a little of rethinking of all the parties involved about what it means to be a neighbor today, and what it should mean, and how we should treat each other, regardless of whether or not we disagree on something. And I think maybe, because this decision, candidly, will probably pass us on tonight, but the reality is we got to be neighbors. And that's not a policy call, that's a personal choice, but I'll leave my comments at that for now, but yeah, you can follow that, you'll be fine.
Thanks, Commissioner Sternfeld. Commissioner Berliner.
Really can't follow up on that. I think that everyone sort of said same things that I feel. It's hard. Do we look at the 1980 map because we see that they were planning on doing this, or do we follow what happened in 1990 or 1991? That's where I'm struggling as well. So I don't have any other comments other than that.
No problem. Thank you. Commissioner Sablon?
So, yeah, I just would echo what Commissioner Sternfeld said and Commissioner Leonard, it really turns on, were these parcels of record pre-1984? And I mean, I'm leaning towards they weren't. We have some depictions of, I think, 2 lots in the 1980 map, but it seems they weren't of record until 1991. And I think expanding the grandfathered pre-1984 to include this based on a fairness and uniformity policy could open the door to other areas in the city. So that's where.
Thanks for those comments. I'm not an attorney, and so I will rely on our city attorney's great explanation in terms of what the city's interpretation is, and also rely on the zoning administrator's expertise when they go out there and review every one of these. I agree with Commissioner Austin as well, that this issue is a hot topic when it came before us last year. And we had a turnout, and it was on both sides. They were passionate about this particular issue, and I think when we look at individual cases that come before us, it's almost like a piecemeal approach, and I agree with the rest of the commissioners' comments that we need to bring this eventually, whether it's down the line, but address this in a more comprehensive way that is consistent across town, if that's the case or not. But right now, I'm looking at it more as there's a municipal code in place that sets the setbacks for pre- and post-1984. And regardless of whether or not the individuals in that neighborhood decide to use that, take advantage of that, the city's not dictating where neighbors should decide to park their RVs in that specific plot. So I'm kind of more looking at it in those lens and support staff's recommendation myself, but, we can continue having a discussion. It's basically not just specific to this particular case, but also thinking of it more on a broad basis, right? And kind of an overall issue that we have to just eventually tackle as well. But I think the comments that the city attorney made as it relates to the interpretation that was outlined in the staff report is fair, and that's kind of how I see it now. So I will see if there's any additional comments for now, and then Commissioner Austin?
Yeah, and I think that you're picking up from this commission that it doesn't actually matter how we vote tonight. This is a not pleasant matter that you as neighbors are going to have to muddle through, regardless of our decision tonight and any future appeals. But I, like Commissioner Castillo, am supportive of affirming the zoner administration interpretation in this case.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Sternfeld.
I would think before we recommend a motion, we might want to straw poll this one and ask folks to see where they're at again, because I'm not quite sure we're all at the same opinion at this point, and I'm not sure all of us have finalized our feelings.
No, absolutely. I'm not going to go down the line, so if the commissioners feel like they want to share a comment at the moment in terms of kind of where they're at, we can go ahead and start. Commissioner Sablon, any comments on that? Any comments based on everything you've heard so far, additional comments in what you've already shared?
Yeah, not much. I do appreciate staff's work on this and the zoning administrator's experience. I think I'm worried about opening the door to similar arguments like this, given the way it's spread out pre-1984 and post-1984. And based on what we have before us, it seems that it wasn't of record pre-1984. So I would lean towards not affirming.
And just one, I think, maybe staff can help clarify this too, is our interpretation of this specific code or definition of pre and post consistent across the board when other issues like this are considered by the city? Is there other examples where there's been a similar case, not necessarily before this commission, but just in general, and you guys use that same interpretation, whether or not, like Commissioner Leonard's distinction was?
Well, we certainly do zoning administrator interpretations, at least a handful of times, a year. We have a book about yay thick of ones going back to 1990 that we have done over the years. I'm not recalling one about this specific issue, but zoning administrator interpretations are, fairly common. Rarely do they bubble up to the planning commission. But the municipal code, by virtue of providing the zoning administrator that ability, and then also providing for this public process for those decisions, so, it's clear that the, municipal code, anticipated that there may need to be some level of interpretation. Is, much of what we do, as much as we try to make it black and white, very much of it remains in various shades of gray. So that's what this process is for, why the zoning administrator is empowered to make these types of interpretations, and then also why those decisions are appealable to the planning commission, for further consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Tilly. Commissioner Berner, any other further comments regarding or discussion that you'd like to?
So, yeah, I actually have another question for city staff. So when we take this up tonight and we make a decision either way, when we go back to look at those setbacks in Zomp, I guess it is. What happens if we what happens if we decide, or we discuss moving it back to a 15-foot setback for that neighborhood? Does that, am I making sense?
Yes, that,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Well, hypothetically, if the city were to change, setback standards for RVs to whatever it might be, those would become applicable to any areas that otherwise don't have any vested rights in prior, versions of zoning code, which are very limited areas, at least in residential portions of our community. There's very little, vested rights in that scenario. So if we were to change it to, 15 feet, citywide, that would become applicable to those folks that had previously been able to do the 5-foot setback.
Okay. Even if hypothetically, say we go with staff's recommendation and reject the appeal, those 4 lots would go to 15 feet if the rest of the lots in that neighborhood also went to 15 feet, or no?
I would presume that if we actually change the municipal code formally, that would supersede this decision.
Okay. I have no other questions or comments at this time, but I reserve the right to.
Absolutely.
make more.
Commissioner Sternfeld.
It pains me, having chaired the meeting where we talked about RV parking and fences at length and heard the public comment and to say what I'm about to say, but and it also pains me because I really struggle anytime going against city staff's recommendation, or in this case zoning administrator's recommendation, but the argument city staff has put forward tonight is based on the level of grayness in whether or not this parcel was either created or not created, on record or not on record. And I don't feel like there's been sufficient argument provided to us to support the level of grayness that's being proposed, essentially, or that at least the city staff's position that there's enough gray here to make a determination. And that is the only thing I'm basing this decision on, putting outside all of the other personal pieces. I can't get to contemplated being completed and on record in the manner in which it's been presented to us tonight. So for that reason, I'm at this time inclined to follow Commissioner Sablon's lead on not supporting the zoning administrator's recommendation.
Thank you. And on my right, Vice Chair Liebig.
Yes, actually, I have a question, I apologize for bringing this up now. In the memo that was circulated prior to our meeting, it appears that Mr. McGinnis filed a letter with the city staff approximately June 3rd or thereafter, and on the very last page of it is a photo. And I just want clarification on this photo. So David, if this is current, or David, or Seamus, I'm sorry, both of you, if this is current, the tongue of the trailer would be extending into the 5-foot setback. So if this is current, the trailer is currently extending into the setback. A 5-foot setback on top of that. So just, I wanted a clarification on that. So regardless of our decision tonight, and if the trailer is pushed as far back as it possibly can go, okay, well, I'm seeing heads shaking no, but my interpretation of the photo that was provided, this would not be permitted. So on that, I'm going to switch back to our deliberation. I just wanted to make that clear, that the photo that was supplied doesn't appear to be behind that 5-foot setback. So I'm going to go kind of by the book on this one, and I'm going to agree that a parcel is a parcel at final map. And the reason I'm doing that is because on everything else we do with our city, we actually base a lot of it upon the final map being pulled. And so I think we should stick with that. But at the same time, I really look forward to revisiting this when it comes back and getting a larger pool of citizens to come and discuss how we can move together as a city and bridge this gap and get rid of the 1984 difference.
Thank you, Vice Chair Liebig. Commissioner Leonard?
Okay. I see these 4 lots being identified 2 different ways as tentative subdivision map 2890 and 2980. The 2890 is on this blown-up version that comes in attachment 3. Is that right? No, I'm sorry. One of the blown-up version of attachment. Well, whatever this is from the slideshow?
Attachment 5.
That's 5? Oh, yes, thank you. So that says 2890. And then on attachment 4, the recorded map for the one in question is, these 4 lots are identified as 2980. I don't know when 2890 or 2980 were recorded as tentative maps. So if we're looking at this 2782, that was a final map. Before it, there was probably a tentative map recorded on property. So these other 4 lots, 2980 or 2890, I just want to find out when that was recorded, because in order for me to determine where my logic is at is pre or post 1984, and that's the standard that should be applied. So the gray area for me with the of record is whether or not it's a tentative map or a final map that has been recorded on the property. I know when I record subdivision maps, the conditions of approval apply at the time that map is approved and recorded. But then, until we build the improvements in the map area, creating those individual parcels, we don't get new standards that are applied at that time when they get their own APN numbers. So I'm sort of in this circular logical argument where I don't know when 2890 or 2980 was recorded as a tentative map, but I see that the final map, 3883, was way ahead in 1990. That's 10 years later. For me, I'm having a problem determining if the standard should apply to a tentative map or a final map, and I don't know when 2980 or I don't know when 2890 or 2980 were recorded, and once I have that answer, I'll have all of the information I need to make a decision. This is a big deal for a lot of people, and the way I'm looking at this is strictly through that logical lens, and I don't have all of the information to be able to make that decision. But, if 2890 or 2980 or after 1984, I'm inclined to vote to, wait, what are we doing here? To vote to uphold the appeal and go and part with staff's recommendation.
Commissioner?
Did I say that right? I'm sorry, the logic in approving voting the, can somebody help me out here?
You would
Yes.
oppose staff's recommendation?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Respectfully. It's out of a logical standpoint where I have to analyze stuff like this in my professional life all the time, and I'm held to things like this. There's a lot of emotional recall here. So I understand the pain.
Is there an opportunity for staff member to
It
help
looks like
clarify?
staff might have some comments in response to this.
Yeah, just those map references for tentative maps. Right now, at least in front of us, we don't know if those 2 maps were ever recorded. Wouldn't be the first time that a parcel map got approved and then a tentative map got approved and didn't get recorded. And really what would be probably most critical would really be a final map, because once that is recorded, that is what establishes, legal lots of record.
Yep. So, but if 2980 or 2890 were never recorded until 1990, so there was no recorded tentative map, and the only thing that actually ever existed was a recorded final map, then it's pretty clear to me that I would say that the post-1984 standard applies. So I'm saying in the absence of any prior recordation with a tentative map which I know they were called something different back in the day because subdivision map act rules were different, we called things different things. I would say that the post-1984 would apply if nothing was recorded earlier.
Any comments from staff regarding that? Commissioner Leonard's comments?
Yeah,
Anything you'd like to add?
Is in front of us, we don't have any evidence about those prior subdivision map references and if they were recorded or when.
Thanks.
So I'm struggling with this actually a little bit, because they are referenced as tentative maps. So are you indicating that your decision would change if you knew the tentative map was actually filed? Versus
Filed is different than recorded. Filed with the county for planning, if they're just looking at an application and it's just identified on all of these maps, that would be a different situation than if it were approved and they put it on property. So an existing application that's still under review that nobody ever does anything with, well, that doesn't mean anything. It's just an application. It's not an actual recorded instrument. And so for me, I choose to interpret the of record as anything that's on title. And when you have a planning application with a tentative map that staff is still looking at, or the planning office is still making decisions about, and it hasn't been voted on, it's not recorded on your property, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, this is an aspect of, we see parcel maps and tentative maps here at the Planning Commission all the time, including later on our agenda. And that's where the Planning Commission acts on that tentative map. But that's really, this first, that's a step in the process. Really, the final step is actually submitting the final map and improvement plans that go to engineering with a lot more detail. And then ultimately, those are, the final maps are approved by the city council, and then they're recorded after that. That's really the time that matters, is when the maps are recorded. And so tentative maps are not recorded, even back in this era. It's when they go to final, when they're recorded, that's really the key thing. And so we see tentative maps here at the Planning Commission all the time, but the final maps go to the city council, routinely in their consent calendar item at that point.
Any other comments, Commissioner Levy?
No, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Austin?
I've got nothing to add.
All right. With that, we will, if there are no additional comments, Commissioner Sternfeld?
Yeah, Commissioner Leonard has a hanging question.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to speak to whether or not he's prepared to make a decision without having the answer, but I think the question is it possible to get an answer, and is it worth continuing to find an answer, or is the chance of success in actually having that information or getting that information pretty slim?
Good evening, Commission.
Good evening.
So, Director Charlene Hamilton, also known as Zoning Administrator. So, this was a tough decision, interpretation to make. It does have several shades of gray. So I completely understand your healthy discussion and the presentations made by both of the property owners. So with respect to Commissioner Leonard's questions and comments about lots of record. So I think the city attorney explained kind of some of the deliberation we went through to determine and apply what we thought was a reasonable standard. And as you note, it's not the firm rule standard, which seems to be expressed in the, at least some of the wording in the zoning code. So you've brought up the two tentative maps, or the references to those tentative maps. Tentative maps are not recorded. So they are acted upon by boards. They will show up, once they are approved, in a title report as being an item that does influence the property. So it does hold some value, some entitlement value. It is not uncommon to have a tentative map that has been acted upon and approved by a body, but then not have a final map record for some period of time. And so if we were to have more time to research that, I think you may find that it will come back that it was a tentative map that was approved potentially by the county, or maybe even by the city. It might be pre-1984, it might be post-1984. And that, in and of itself, will just add another layer of gray under that discussion of what is of record. And so I don't think postponing a decision tonight and allowing us to research that further is really going to bring back a black and white. All of a sudden, I lost my train of thought. A black and white evidence, another piece of evidence for you to deliberate on.
Thank you.
Does that help address some of the concerns?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right.
With that, any other comments or discussions among the commission? If not, I'm going to go ahead and entertain a motion if there's someone who would like to make one.
Should we do a straw poll before we do a motion?
Well, I
We
think
did a straw
if
poll.
someone doesn't, well, I think if someone does a motion, we can do a roll call vote, and then if it passes, the motion passes. If it fails, the motion fails. So it's really, I think we've had a lot of discussion on this issue, and I think we have a sense as to where commissioners stand. And if there is someone who would like to make a motion, we can move forward with a motion. We can do a roll call vote. And then if it passes, again, it passes. If it fails, it fails.
Would the motion be on,
The motion would be to accept staff's recommendation as outlined in the report to, reading it
okay,
real quick.
I will make that.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, just kidding.
We can make a variety of motions
You
at this
can-
point, just
that's
as a
right.
point of
You're
order.
right. Yeah, you're right.
Write this down.
Staff has a recommendation to support the zoning administrator's decision and deny the appeal. We can make a decision to support that, or a recommendation to support that. We can make a recommendation to support the appeal. We can make a recommendation to continue. We have a variety of options. If
Thanks for the clarification, Commissioner Sternfeld. So is there a motion that someone would like to entertain?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the appeal.
I'll second.
Okay.
So let's read that out. Let's read out because we've got the affirmative and dispositive, whatever you call that. So the motion is,
To,
Maybe, can I take an attempt at this?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah.
You would find that the rationale for the approval of the interpretation is not sufficient based on the date of the final map, and the appeal would be upheld.
Did I get
Okay.
that's alternative number one in our staff
Okay,
report.
so I'm making a motion to find that the rationale for the approval of the interpretation is not sufficient for the following, because the date on the map is after the 1984 code.
Correct.
Okay.
The recorded date on the map.
The recorded date on the map.
Okay.
I will second that motion.
Second by Commissioner Sternfeld. Could we do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Sternfels,
Aye.
Commissioner Sablon,
Aye.
Commissioner Leonard,
Aye.
Commissioner Berliner,
Aye.
Commissioner Austin,
No?
Vice Chair Levick,
Aye.
Chair Castillo.
No.
Thank you.
The motion passes.
Any interest?
I'm sorry, can you just read the vote, just do a vote count so we, out loud so the public can be on the record too, please? So it's 3-2?
5-2.
5-2, sorry. Jesus. It's only been an hour and a half. The motion passes 5-2. Thanks.
Right. Any interested party may appeal the decision of the planning commission in this matter to the city council by filing a written appeal with the city clerk within 15 days of tonight's action, and that appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for that discussion. We'll move on to item number 3, a public hearing regarding proposed G tentative parcel map 5168. Ms. Allen, oh, Ms. Allen's not here.
Yeah, Ms. Allen, I will be filling in for Ms.
Okay.
Allen. So tentative parcel map 5168 is a divides the 7.56 acre vacant parcel into 3 2.5 acre parcels along Jefferson Boulevard. The property is zoned rural estate, which has a minimum lot size of 2.5 acres. As a part of the motion, Planning Commission would be finding that the map is exempt from CEQA under Class 15 categorical exemption for a minor land division. This concludes staff presentation. I am available to answer any questions, as is the city engineer, and the applicant is also in attendance tonight to answer any questions.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. If there's anyone that'd like to comment on item number 3, this is your opportunity to do so. If there's not, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Any comments or questions from staff on this issue? To staff on this issue.
I have no comments or questions.
Commissioner Austin, none? Commissioner Leonard? If you want, I can come back to you.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sternfeld, any comments or, questions to staff regarding item number 3? Okay. Commissioner Berliner?
None.
Commissioner Sablon? And I have no comments either.
No comments.
All right, no comments? So with
Chair
that, we're going
Castillo?
Yes.
Oh,
Now, Commissioner, I was just checking to see if Commissioner Sternfeld had any comments regarding this item, but we can go, Commissioner Austin?
We need to maybe deliberate for a minute or two,
Yeah.
as we
Yeah.
seem to be missing a commissioner.
Yep.
Commissioner Berliner said she had no comment.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, but Commissioner Austin?
I was going
about
to
to motion?
remove staff recommendation, because I went so well last time.
You want, so is that your motion right now?
Did you have anything to add, Commissioner Sternfeld?
I sure don't.
Okay, that's my motion.
All right, motion by Commissioner Austin, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Sablon. Can we go, just double check, can we go ahead and vote without Commissioner Berliner here? Should we wait for Commissioner Berliner to?
Pretty sure she can add on, can she not?
If you guys if you have a quorum, you can
We do,
continue.
okay.
Quorum, I
All
said.
those
But if
in
you want to
favor?
wait, as a
Aye.
matter of courtesy, you can.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Item number 4, it's a request for continuance, for a tentative parcel map, creating 2 parcels for 1 parcel totaling 49.73 acres, located at 3771 Channel Drive. Are there, do we need a vote for?
Yeah, since this was an advertised hearing, we do need a vote to
Okay.
continue that to a date uncertain at the property owner's request.
I move we continue this item to a date uncertain.
Second by Commissioner Sternfeld. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. And with that, we will move to item number,
General admin.
General Administration Functions, Part 2, informal discussion. Is there anything the Commission would like to share before we adjourn?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner
So,
Sternfeld.
tonight we had a lengthy discussion on RV parking, and I think there's an expectation from the commission on how, some kind of plan or discussion about how we move this item forward. And I know that city staff may be unprepared to have that discussion this evening, but I'd really like to see if we can find a path to at least plan to tackle this issue in the future. I feel like there's a desire from most commissioners here to at least attempt it, despite that being difficult and challenging and maybe impossible. But I think I would personally like some feedback from city staff in the near future on if we're going to approach that and how and when, so that we can at least have clarity on that moving forward, because I feel like this may not be the only time we see this.
Yeah, it's something we can raise to the city manager and get some additional direction from him, particularly since anything we do here on this topic ultimately would go to before the city council as well. But it is something that you're right, this will not likely be the only time something like this comes up. The neighborhoods are scattered throughout town. They're not like one way over in one corner, one way over another corner. So it is likely to happen again. While I have the chair forum here for a moment under a formal discussion, I would like to talk about our upcoming meeting schedule. Based on our fact that we were successfully acted on the items on tonight's agenda, we will cancel our next meeting which would be on June 20th, I think that's, yes, June 20th. And then we will also be canceling our next meeting after that, which would have been scheduled on July 4th. And so our next meeting will not be until July 18th. So everyone can enjoy a little break here, and then we'll be back on July 18th.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, Commissioners?
I had one more follow-up question. So our last meeting, we did deny a project, which is something this commission really does. Has there been any additional follow-up, or is that going to council anytime soon?
No, the applicant has not formally withdrawn that application, but they are also currently not pursuing it either. So, as it stands now, the planning commission decision stands, and they have not indicated to us that they wish to proceed to go to council on that item.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, with that, meeting adjourned.